Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Om. Hum. Right. So we're going to do a couple of things this week, but I want to start off with just a brief recap of last week, really just highlighting a few points, say what we were doing. So we were looking at the mind and right view as our field of investigation, if you like. We're investigating whatever we experience through the senses, including the mind sense. I talked about how the mind is quite intangible compared to the body, which we can feel, we can touch. And yet the mind has all these capacities and all these functions that we can know. I was also emphasizing being aware of our direct experience. And so that's on the one side, and then the other side we have usually thinking about experience, which can often lead to us ending up sort of being a bit caught within a story or coming from a point of view in the mind. So we've got these two modes, the modes of thinking about, more conceptual mode, and the mode of direct experience. And we're looking to, if you like, put more attention on that mode of direct experience. Not all the attention, because we need our thinking minds, we need our sort of conceptualizing our minds to function in any meaningful way. But we can be more balanced about where that, about those two modes. And I talked about right view, particularly right view of objects, or right view on experience as objects that arise in experience. They arise, they persist, they disappear in different time frames. So you can talk about objects, about happenings, about arisings, or phenomena. And we use this framing, if you like. We look through this particular lens because it helps us see all the other conditioned views that we hold in the mind. All these different colored glasses that we wear, and how, if you like, how the lens that we see through is always colored. It's whatever coloring we see through, it affects whatever we're looking at. And I mentioned another couple of qualities of mindfulness, or of awareness. So a quality of the unbiased mind and the mind that is impartial. And finally, I talked about how we can be aware of how we're relating to experience, how we're relating to any aspect of our experience, a thought, an emotion, a feeling, a body sensation. And we can we can learn to recognize whether we're relating in a more personal way or more impersonally. Simply happenings and arisings in the mind. So this week, I want to start with a question for you. So sometimes I'll say, when I'm teaching, mindfulness can be aware of anything. We can be aware of anything. And I was just thinking about that and thinking, I think there are lots of arguments to be made that mindfulness can't be aware of everything. But I think we can be aware of a lot of anything that is there within our experience. We have the capacity to be aware of it. Anything that we experience on some conscious level. But another way to look at that question is something like, what do you find most difficult to be aware of in your life and in your practice? What would you say were the difficult objects of experience? So if anyone has, in a sense, from your own experience, what you find it perhaps particularly difficult to be aware of, do unmute yourself and just tell us all. It may well vary. Yeah, Tina. Yeah.
I have something. The first thing that came to mind is my fourth toe. When I do the body scan, I think it's very difficult to contact my fourth toe.
Okay. That's very specific. So very specific body part. Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else? Niels.
I think it can be difficult to be aware of anger, feelings that I don't want to identify with, and especially if someone points it out for me, then it's like, and I don't want to be aware or sort of acknowledge.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I think you brought up a distinction there of, so the question was, what is it difficult? Yeah, so difficult to be aware of. And you're saying one of the things that makes that difficult is because you don't want to be aware of it. There's a feeling of, oh, it's uncomfortable to be aware of. Yeah, so that's important. Good, we'll be coming on to that. Anyone else? Maybe have one more.
Sophie can go.
Yeah. Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, what I sometimes struggle with is when I focus on my breath, then I start to pay attention to it and I feel like I change my breathing. So then it's really difficult to just be aware of my natural breath. So yeah, I find that very challenging.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, Christopher, why don't you as well? You go.
Just wanted to quickly say I find being mindful of food very difficult.
Okay.
Not because it's unpleasurable, but because it is perhaps pleasurable. There seems to be sort of an animalistic desire in me to just eat it as quickly as possible. And every time I sit down and make a concentrated attempt to be mindful of what I'm eating, it usually fails.
Yeah, great, good. Well, hopefully we will illuminate some of these areas a bit more. So maybe one thing to say, I think you've all, in different ways, if you like, I think you've focused on the certain types of experiences rather than how you're relating to those experiences. And so that's fair enough. I think that's quite an interesting thing. So you've related to, yes, the toes or the food or the anger. So all objects of experience. There was one more, wasn't there, Sophie? I think I missed the breath, that sense of controlling the breath. So in this session, we're going to be working quite a lot with that relationship, how we're relating to different experiences. So hopefully it will illuminate some of these difficult objects, because they are, some of them they are. There are things that make that make eating or make anger or that sense of controlling the breath quite difficult. Other things come into the equation and it's more difficult to just be aware of what's happening. Particularly what we're going to focus on this evening are often what are called afflictive emotions. So emotions that cause suffering is quite a good way of describing this word, afflictive. So we all experience them. We all experience things like anger or frustration or disappointment or upset, and many different types of experiences, sometimes quite strong, quite difficult emotions. And mostly we want to get away from them, as Niels, I think, was saying. It's like we're there, oh, no thank you. And other emotions, other things that we find it difficult to be aware of, because, as you were saying, Christopher, they might be quite pleasant, and therefore we get really wrapped up in them. And food is a really, well, I think it's one that's a significant one for a lot of us. So they might be pleasant, but they're not necessarily very helpful to practice if we're looking to be a bit more aware of patterns around eating or overeating or being mindful while eating, just taking awareness into the process of eating. So there's a number of areas where we need or can be mindfulness and discernment really help. There's an American Dharma teacher called Steve Armstrong, and he says something like, your mind is a dangerous neighborhood. Don't go there alone. Your mind is a dangerous neighborhood. Don't go there alone. Take mindfulness with you. And this is mindfulness in its protective factor, if you like. It's mindfulness as a way of working with difficult emotions or strong emotions. Yeah, so as I said, some emotions, some feelings can be pleasant, some very pleasant, and they don't obviously cause us suffering, not superficially. So sometimes it's a bit more hidden. Perhaps with excitement or a sense of intoxication, we can end up then feeling a bit empty or a bit, oh, what was that about? I remember occasionally after retreats, after getting a bit overexcited after some of my early retreats and almost feeling hungover. It was almost, I had had nothing to drink, but it almost felt like I'd had gone out and had a few beers or something, but it was just that sense of getting lots and lots of energy from a retreat and then going and blowing it all. So yeah, there are different ways and different degrees that we can suffer through our mental states, our emotional states and habits. And of course, just to make sure that we don't forget that there are many skillful emotions and positive mind states. Patience, love, generosity, faith, mindfulness, and wisdom, just to name a few. But today it's the difficult ones we're focusing on, and how we can use mindfulness and right view at some of these very strong times in practice, using this receptive, non-interfering awareness of emotions. So we're not looking to make them go away, but to understand their nature, to understand the nature of anger or of disappointment or of greed. So, as many of you will know, the afflictive emotions come in different categories. So we've got the category of greed or craving, but we've also got aversion or hatred. And then there's a third category that, if you like, the other two are underpinned by, craving and aversion are underpinned by delusion or moha. I mentioned moha last week. So just to fill out the unholy trio, so the names of the others, so greed, lobha, and aversion is, in the Pali, it's dosa, or dvesa in Sanskrit. So you've got lobha, dosa, and moha. Don't they sound like a... I don't know what they sound like, actually. I like the names. They're also sometimes talked about as the poisons. And in this sense, it's quite a strong word, isn't it? But they even a little bit of, say, resentment, you can feel how that can poison the mood, poison the feeling in the mind. Perhaps you felt sort of quite content or quite happy, and then something comes up, or maybe you see somebody who you feel some resentment towards, and you can really feel how that can poison the mind state in that moment. Poison the mind so that it reduces those sort of skillful or joyful qualities. So before I go into craving and aversion, I want to say a little bit about working with mindfulness. So you get, in a way, you get the good news first. Otherwise, I think it can be a little bit depressing or overwhelming. So Bhante Sangharakshita, he says mindfulness in this sense is working with the bedrock of the mind. So it's really deep stuff, deep patterns, deep habits, or strong habits, the bedrock of the mind. And that takes courage and kindness and willingness, a willingness to be really quite gently aware of our direct experience. Especially when our usual habit is to, in some way, avoid or turn away from things that we find difficult or we don't like. So with mindfulness, we're learning to stay with in this gentle way, not in a confrontative way where we're challenging ourselves, but just can I just be with this? Can I be with this? Just maybe it's just for a few seconds, and then you have to turn away and do something else. So it is quite confronting, or it can be quite confronting, to really stay with and see things about ourselves that we find difficult and perhaps we don't like. Things that don't perhaps fit our image of who we are, our self-image. So I think with mindfulness, there's quite a lot of honesty needed. Yeah, we have to be quite honest with ourselves, or to the extent that we're able to be honest with ourselves, mindfulness can flourish. But it's a kind mindfulness. It's not it's not a sort of punishing looking at what's happening. It's like, oh, it really is this question: can I be with this? Can I be with this? So often the alternatives, as I say, they can be to turn away, if you like, to try and suppress the difficult emotion. Or the other way is acting it out, sometimes talked about as indulging. So then maybe if we experience this resentment, we can either suppress it by, no, I don't really, I'm really quite a nice person, and I don't really feel that. Try and turn away from it. But acting it out means perhaps we let it get a stronger grip on the mind, and we start perhaps speaking that resentment, or yeah, maybe we're a bit unpleasant to the person who we feel resentful to. So we're working with those two, the indulging, acting out, or suppressing, and the middle way, if you like, is the staying with of mindfulness. So I think it's just really important to say that it's natural, the tendencies to either act out or to suppress. And one of the ways we suppress is we sort of swerve away from what we don't like and what doesn't fit our self-image. I have a very good friend, just to give you a little bit of an example, and we were on retreat together. It was just before we were both ordained, actually. It was a couple of years before we were ordained. And she came up with this phrase. She was having trouble on the retreat with the ritual. She was not very fond of ritual, but she realized that she just had a view about herself, and it went something like, I'm not the sort of person who enjoys ritual. It really sort of didn't fit with her self view. So it wasn't a strongly negative feeling, or it wasn't strongly afflictive or sort of painful, but it was having quite a big influence on what she did or didn't do. So I think often we can have that view in the back of the mind. I'm not the sort of person. I'm not the sort of person who feels resentment. I'm not the sort of person who tries to get what I want. And we like to think of ourselves often as the generous, the pleasant, the friendly, but we all have moments where we're not like that, and that's part of who we are. That's part of our package, if you like. So mindfulness, if you like, gets us to notice those bits perhaps more than we usually would. The pettiness, the self-interest. But mindfulness doesn't blame and it doesn't judge. It's saying just notice this, and what's that like? What's that like? So those qualities of patience and humor even are really important, are really helpful when we're recognizing things. So mindfulness also has the flavor of acceptance and allowing. This is part of the receptivity of allowing something to be just as it is. So acceptance doesn't mean that your anger or your resentment or your greediness doesn't matter. It's not saying that. Mindfulness is clearly acknowledging what's skillful, what's not skillful. But acceptance is saying, well, this is what's here right now. So it helps you be present to something that's happening, rather than either trying to make it go away or perhaps pretending that it's not really there. So really helpful not to judge what's happening, or if you do judge, the quality in the mind, that you recognize that judging. Oh, it's judging mind. It's part of the part of aversion. It's part of not wanting. And whatever you can recognize, if you like, helps the quality of awareness, helps it sort of, it then becomes freer of that, perhaps that quality of judging. If judging is recognized, then it's no longer a part of the lens that you're looking through. It becomes a bit clearer and manifesting more strongly those qualities of awareness. So curiosity and interest are also great gifts, I think, when we have strong emotions or difficult emotions, because they help us not identify with what's happening. It's like, oh, that's interesting. There's really strong aversion. What's that like? What does that feel like in the mind and the body? So one of my favorite images is in relation to this, to working with perhaps some of the bigger and scarier emotions, is I think I mentioned David Attenborough before, but there's a particular, one of David Attenborough's top 10 moments is called David and the Gorillas. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but it's where they're doing some filming somewhere in Africa, where there's, I think it's in a reserve, so the gorillas are protected, but they're wild. They're still very, very wild. And he goes and he does some filming there, and he sort of has to mimic the gorillas to have some chance of them accepting him and not attacking him or turning on him. So he sort of crawls into through this long grass, and eventually he settles and they start approaching him, and eventually they start grooming him. They start playing with his hair and trying to pick fleas off him and that sort of thing. And he is absolutely delighted. He's got this huge grin on his face. His sense of wonder and delight is very, very touching. But he's surrounded by these really dangerous animals who, with one sort of swipe, could kill him. So sometimes I think of this image, like our big scary emotions are perhaps like these gorillas. And I think if we can even have a tiny amount of that sort of attitude of, oh, okay, here you are. That's okay. It's okay that you're here. Anger or dread or disappointment or distress. The sense of, okay, I'll see if I can be with you. So I think this can extend our emotional range. It can extend what we're willing to be with, rather than try and push away. So yeah, new territory, things like, just really being able to be with fear or doubt, or vulnerability. To be able to say, this is fear. This is what it feels like in the body and in the mind. So with that, you bring some objectivity to it. Bring a sense of, oh, this is what it's like. So we're still feeling what we feel, but we're learning to not be overwhelmed by the emotional state or really pushing it away. Pema Chodron, a teacher in a Tibetan tradition who I imagine many of you will have heard of, some wonderful books. She says this place where we're aware without pushing away or being overwhelmed. She said this is where the warrior learns compassion. I really like this. We learn how not to be afraid of our own minds. When we can be with what's happening without reaction. Okay, so let's just say a little bit. I'm going to go through these quite quickly, and during the week I'll be adding bits and pieces of how you can practice with these. So we'll look at aversion, hatred, not wanting, a sense of pushing away. So I'm sure you can make your own lists here, but it includes things like irritation, grumpiness, fault-finding mind, the mind that criticizes or finds fault. Those, if you've got those glasses on, wherever you look, something's not quite right. And then resentment, resistance to doing something, anger, tight, closed mind. Or sometimes just not bothering, can't be bothered mind. There can be a sort of pushing away in that. And this is often the easiest of the poisons for us to see. And because it causes us suffering, we become aware of it quite quickly. And it's not something that's hidden to us usually. So the work of awareness here is just to feel it out in the mind. But there's a few more that you might feel so these are maybe a little bit more specific to meditation. So I think in meditation we can sometimes experience aversion as frustration or impatience. We see what's wrong, what's not good enough. Not enough concentration, not enough peacefulness. So we're judging the experience that we're having. Oh, sometimes we're also comparing mind, which compares perhaps how we were doing last week with how we're doing this week, or how somebody else is doing. Perhaps we think that they're doing really well, their meditation's going great, and ours isn't. So that sort of comparing mind causes a lot of suffering. When we work to correct or interfere with what's happening, it's usually happening because we don't accept what's happening. There's some degree of aversion. So the bias with aversion is always, it's away from or it's against the object. That might be, again, yes, we don't want or don't like a particular sort of food, or an unpleasant smell, or it can be more significant ways our aversion towards another person. Or our aversion towards ideas. So we can notice what's feeding aversion in the mind once we become aware of it. It might be particular sorts of thoughts that you can come to see. They make the aversion stronger. They make the resentment or the disappointment stronger. So in this practice, we're really looking to get a sense through this broad awareness of the different conditions that support helpful states of mind, skillful states of mind, or the ones that don't. And we do that really just by looking quite simply at what's happening. not getting over focused on perhaps a experience of, or certainly if we're focusing on the object at the end, if we're focusing on this person, then often our resentment or whatever it is will grow. But if we focus on our own feeling, what's the feeling in the mind? That's what we're looking, that's what all of this territory is about. It's nothing to do with the other person, to do with, in a way, what the mind is reacting to. It's to do with how and what's happening in your own mind. We're looking to understand how dosa, how aversion is working in our own mind, how it affects the body, how it affects the mind, how it affects our thoughts. But to do that, if you like, we have to recognize that our attention has got hooked onto something outside of ourselves, and to bring it back, usually initially by recognizing the feeling. So that's also quite challenging, isn't it? In some ways, it is easier to keep it out there. It's about what they're doing. I didn't like what they did. But that means that we just keep suffering. We just keep feeling our own resentment, aversion, the complaint in our mind. They may be totally unaware of that. So really, it's our responsibility, how we work with the mind. So the next one is craving, or lobha, or wanting, that feeling of wanting in the mind. So lobha, wanting, it can often feel very close to us, quite difficult to see. The degree of wanting in the mind, and it's often only when something is going to be taken away from us that we'll realize, oh no, there is some desire for that particular object. My partner was teasing me at lunchtime. He'd made some rather superb, I have to say, some Valentine's vegan chocolate mousses, and we had leftover ones at lunchtime today. And he said he was just joking, but he says something like, "Oh, no craving. There's no craving in my mind." And so we were sharing a bowl, so I took it away. I said, "Really, is there no craving in the mind?" And he said there wasn't actually, so I put it back again. So I mean, you can play these little games with yourself, can't you? It's like, oh, how would I feel if the second half of this nice thing that I'm halfway through eating disappeared? Could I give it away if my the person I'm eating with just said that they would like it? I mean, maybe we can't. I think often we can't, and that's fine. We're not trying to force anything, but we're just trying to see what's happening in the body and the mind. So craving, if you like, we're biased towards an object. So aversion, we're biased away from. Craving's nature is to want. And often that feels very natural. It feels very right. This sort of pleasure that we associate with particular objects. But I think it's important to recognize that pleasure is not the same as craving. Craving is several steps further down the line. So pleasure is an earlier part of the process, connected with feeling, connected with Vedana. So pleasure will naturally arise through the senses. But the question is, how much do we pursue it? How much do we try and keep it going? That's when cravings got in there. It's like trying to, if you like, wring out the last drops of pleasure from a situation. So sometimes, we can just ask ourselves: am I doing this because it's causing pleasure, or am I doing it because it's a helpful thing to do at the moment? So we can sort of, in a way, just check our motives, and it may be that it's the right thing to do and it's bringing us pleasure. So we've got the best of both worlds. So craving can manifest as a longing, wishing, hoping, some sort of enchantment. It's like we're seeing this object through very rose-coloured glasses. The lens is quite sort of soft, and our desire for something makes things very attractive. They feel full of promise, as if just having something or acting on this longing will bring further happiness. So the seductiveness of craving, of longing, of wanting, of hoping is very powerful. And well, certainly the Buddha didn't underestimate it, did he? Craving is the root cause of our suffering. So in meditation, watch out for expectations about practice. This is one of the strongest ways in which craving or wanting shows up in our practice. So wanting practice to be better, thinking that it should be different to how it is, again comparing how it was. And sometimes ambition and striving come in here. And all of these things mean we can't usually be with something as it is. There's a desire for it to be different, usually to be better. So again, patience comes in very strongly. Sayadaw U Tejaniya, the teacher I've been on retreat with in Burma quite a bit, he says patience is really important. Impatience reveals craving. When we want something, but patience, if you like, when patience is present in the mind, you can be sure that there's an absence of craving. So I just want to say just very, very briefly, talking about craving here. And of course, we do desire often to practice the Dharma. We might even feel some sense of longing in relation to our practice or our feelings of idealism. So just to say that wisdom also has desires. It's not only craving that has desires. Wisdom wants to. But usually wisdom wants what's best in any given situation. It's not looking out for oneself, if you like. Craving is self-oriented, and wisdom is not. So one of the ways this can manifest in practice is if you find that there's a desire for a result in practice. You're looking for a particular sort of outcome from your meditation. You want to be concentrated, you want to be in jhana, you want to have continuous mindfulness, you want to just feel good, you're outcome oriented. Whereas wisdom is has the desire to practice. So it's much more sort of present moment oriented. That desire to practice, to put the conditions, keep putting the conditions into place moment by moment. It hasn't got that future oriented sort of leaning into. Yeah, I'm running out of time. But I think there are many, many opportunities if we're able to watch the mind, if we're able to have some degree of awareness, some degree of mindfulness quite regularly, then we will see moments of wanting, moments of craving. And they could be really small. They can be, I've got lots of stories I could tell here, and unfortunately I don't have time, so I'm just going to tell you one or two that are really quite small. Well, one's very small. So it's what I call my salt story. So again, my partner is always worrying about me because I put too much salt on my food. So periodically, especially as I'm getting older, so periodically I attempt to just try and bring more awareness to that process. I don't try and just completely cut it off, but I try and just, in a way, let awareness make the choice, actually make the decision. So I remember one time when I could see really clearly there was the desire, if you like, that desire in the mind. And already at the time of the desire, there was a reaching out towards the salt pot. And there was this image in the mind of, it was almost like a past rememberings of salty food, yum, yum. It was all sort of wrapped up all together, but it had its own flavor of pleasure. Oh, pleasure, salt equals pleasure. And I could just see all this happen, it just in tiny, tiny moments, it all coming together, this reaching out, this sense of pleasure from something so small. And then because there was awareness in the moment, I felt like there was the choice to not have it or to have it. And that particular time I chose not to. That it was like, oh, something had been seen clearly enough about, actually about craving. Wasn't seeing anything clearly about the results of having too much salt. It's a bit unknown. But I could see clearly the desire in the mind that associated with this habit of sprinkling. So if you like, craving manifests in relation to many, 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 many different objects throughout our day. And that was just one. So if you like, the salt was relatively unimportant. But recognizing liking in experience, recognizing craving, and recognizing them, craving as craving, if you like, craving as something unhelpful in practice. And that was sort of, in a way, what allowed the mind to release that desire to have what it wanted. So it just shows you the mind can like anything, can't it? I did have another little story, but I haven't really got time to tell it, so I'll leave it for now. So we're learning to recognize craving and aversion through these small moments, and also using right view. So if you like this, the aversion, craving, delusion, they are also objects that can be known. That sense of how I'm relating to this object that's at the end of the process, the salt, the person who has annoyed us. Much more significant is that sense of relationship. Oh, there's aversion in the mind. What's that like? What does craving feel like? What does self-pity feel like? Can I be with that? How does any afflictive emotion think? What type of thoughts tend to arise with that emotion or feeling? What type of thought? Thoughts sometimes they can. It's almost like they're the fuel that we throw onto the fire of a particular emotion and watch it go whoosh. And sometimes we have to watch it hundreds of times in awareness. Particular thoughts or images in the mind, fuel, fire. And we can watch it, and I've done it myself, days on end. We can watch and feel what's happening, and eventually that fuel runs out. We stop feeding the fire in the same way. Fire goes down, the mind calms down. So I'll leave it there, and we've got time for a few questions. Yeah, maybe if we'll start with perhaps someone who's not asked a question before, or just in case there are some people out there who'd like to, but just need a little bit of time. So just unmute yourself, and myself or Dharmasara will see you. If there are any questions about anything I've said or anything not quite clear, or you think that's all very well, but those are good sorts of questions. Okay, so let's open it up more generally then, just anybody who has anything that
someone raised their hand, but I can't find the person.
Okay.
It's me.
Great.
Okay, great.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Hello.
brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question because you were talking about aversion and craving and how you can relate to this in meditation. But what about, for me personally, that's the most difficult is the moha, the delusion. Because sometimes it's just not clear to yourself, you see?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I probably will talk about moha, but next week. We'll see. There's just very little time. But moha, you're right. It has that quality of confusion. It has the quality of. It's the opposite of wisdom. Mm-hmm. So it's not clear. It masks what's happening. So I'll say this in case I don't get a chance to say much about it. But yeah, if you can see that happening in the mind, then okay, moha is in the mind. This sort of almost like clouds of making things not quite clear. Then it can be helpful just to recognize, delusion. What does that feel like? And not trying to sort of make those clouds go away, but what's that like? And then maybe something. Once we're with that, we tend to see other things within the picture, like the thoughts or the body sensations, or something else that, if you like, that makes the picture become a little bit clearer. So it might be that then you notice, there's also, and there's aversion, or there's this. But delusion can be really interesting, just to recognize that sort of fuzziness or lack of clarity or vagueness. And the other side of delusion, which is very strong views when we come out with things really emphatically or strongly. No room for anybody else to be right or to have an opinion, but strong views are also often a sign of delusion.
I had a question. It's maybe not a very high level question, perhaps, but I just thought it was really interesting how you said craving's nature is to want, as in like attributing the wanting to the craving. Could you say anything more about that?
What did you take from it? I'm just, yeah, it obviously landed with you. What interested you about it?
Well, I mean, I know I'm not supposed to kind of say that I am the craver and you know, I'm the one wanting, but I just thought it's just the idea that craving is wanting, but it's not me.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so if you like, the model of mind is such that we've got all these if you like, all these different things arising in the mind, and some of them arise more frequently because, if you like, because there's quite a lot of habit behind them. So yeah, this sense of wanting or craving arising in the mind. So yeah, often we act on our craving because we identify with I want this, I want chocolate, or I want to do it my way or something. So if you like, yeah, there is that sense of, how is it just to know craving arising in the mind, and seeing it clearly. You may also see that sense of self as well, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, it's that in a way, each of the things that arise has its own nature. Awareness has its own nature, has its own sort of qualities to it, but craving has its own qualities too. One of my retreats in Burma, you just reminded me, I actually wrote job descriptions of the poisons. I was experiencing a lot of craving, and I was experiencing a lot of delusion, and so I just wrote how do they behave, how are they behaving in my own mind, and it was fascinating, actually, objectifying to some degree, but through my own subjective experience, making that becoming a bit more objective. So yeah, how does delusion work in the mind? What's it doing? Oh, one of the things I realized about delusion was that it loved the status quo. It just loved it. It was quite happy to sit in meditation for, well, I was doing an awful lot of, I was doing a whole retreat worth of delusions, actually quite happy to just sit there and not do very much, sort of go la la la, la for hours, actually. And I wouldn't quite have known, in a way, that until I'd sort of looked at it quite directly. What's going on here? What's going on? The mind that's, and it could be quite embarrassing. Some of the things I wrote down, I don't remember them now, but they were sort of quite embarrassing. Think, wow, this is when I'm supposed to be meditating, and this is what my mind is doing. But very helpful to see. Yeah, so yeah, they each have their own nature, and that's in a way what we're feeling into, the nature of the mind, the nature of resentment, the nature of self-pity. How does self-pity think and feel? And not in an unkind way, not in a judgmental way, but in a curious, way that it helpfully helps us not take it too seriously. Yeah, you can have a lot of fun with these afflictive emotions at times when they're not being really, really painful and difficult, and you just want them to go away. Does that give you something?
Yeah, that gives me something. Yeah, maybe there's just more to think about and keep observing.
Yeah. Just to say, in this this particular way of approaching is that there isn't a strong emphasis, a strong conceptual emphasis on impermanence or not self. A bit more so on dukkha, because that's more directly experienced. So there isn't a strong conceptual framework, because it's very, very easy for us to, oh, I've seen not self, or I've seen impermanence, but actually just to sort of look at what's actually happening, and if you can notice the truth of that, then sometimes we get deeper answers about what is what the Buddha was talking about with reality. Yeah, it's very, very easy to fool the conceptual mind. By focusing on direct experiencing, we're trying not to do that. Okay, good. Thank you for your questions, each of you. So let's have a couple of minutes leg stretch, and then I'll lead us into meditation. And I'm hoping to give us enough time to have a short, maybe even 10-minute break before the breakout rooms. This time.
But today just someone else with a question.
Oh, okay. I didn't see. If you'd like to ask your question, and then we'll just see if it's possible to answer it briefly now.
I think it's Radek who put his hand up.
Yeah.
Go on then.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask because you it was mentioned in your answer, and you mentioned it briefly in your talk, and I sometimes don't get the distinction between the healthy or helpful desire for the Dharma and the unskillful one, and I'm just like struggling with it, I think, and I just wanted to ask you for your like experiences in this area. I would be thankful for that.
So the difference between the more skillful or unskillful desire. Okay, so in a way you can tune into this in your own experience. So to the degree that you when you notice your desire is more self-oriented, it's sort of what can what's in this for me, what can I have, then you've got a very clear motivation that's to do with craving. If it's more okay, looking at this situation, what is best here? What would be best for the either for the person that I'm with, what would be most helpful for perhaps a group situation that I'm in. So there's a bigger frame of reference. It's not self-oriented. So that's one way. But you can really. So this is different. Another way, you can also just tune into the feeling of what craving feels like in the mind. And often the more sort of self-referential craving will have a particular feeling. It will feel perhaps a bit narrower. Whereas wisdom in the mind feels very different. And there's a sense of knowing, there's a sense of understanding. Craving doesn't really have that. Doesn't really have much in the way of understanding. It wants, that's its nature. Wisdom's nature is to understand. So that's just a couple of ways. I know that there are others, but that's just a couple of ways in which you can tune into how they feel in the mind. I mean, you can even check in when there's a feeling of wanting something. Check in. What does this feel? Does this feel more like craving? Does it feel like it has the flavor of understanding? Does it open something out or illuminate something, or is it sort of just quite a strong, more tight desire? Okay, hopefully that addresses that for the moment. So let's have a minute or a couple of minutes leg stretch, and then we'll sit. I'll lead us through a sit. It's taking that relaxed and settled back stance to resting with your experience. Not immediately turning your mind to anything in particular, but allowing the mind to settle. Allowing body and mind to come to settle in the present moment. Sometimes it can have more the feeling of every now and again just waking up into the present moment. And checking in with how you're feeling in body and mind. And you might not use labels or verbalize around this at all, but you can have a sense of how you are. How the body is places of tension and relaxation. places of ease or discomfort. Becoming aware of what's happening in the mind. Noticing thinking when it happens. Noticing feeling. And perhaps a quality of feeling different parts of the body around the heart. Connected with warmth in the hands, softness, clothing. Becoming aware of any particular quality of emotion. And perhaps there's an overall sense of emotion or mood in the present moment. And this mood can be the mood of awareness, recognizing what's happening throughout the different senses, including the mind sense. And seeing if it's possible to tune in to any sense of wanting or not wanting in your experience. Perhaps there's the wanting to move, change your posture. Wanting to scratch an itch. And perhaps before you do those things, just tune into the sense of the desire to move or the desire to scratch. Or there might be a desire to put another blanket on or take a layer of clothing off. Desire to open our eyes. And really appreciating the mind that's able to be aware of craving when it happens. Sometimes craving and aversion, lobha and dosa, happen almost together, two sides of the same coin. Perhaps there's a not wanting to be sleepy or to be restless. And there's a desire for a more awake, mindful state. And remembering it doesn't matter so much what the desired object is or the undesired object, but being aware of how craving, desire, or aversion feel within the mind, within the body. And seeing if we can be aware of them in a way where we're less identified. Seeing them more as objects or happenings, phenomena in the mind, in the body.
And it's really helpful to remember that we're not trying to stop craving or aversion, not trying to make them go away. We're trying to be aware of them. And this, over time, naturally reduces their impact, reduces their influence on the mind. Not trying to think about anything, just trying to be aware of what's already happening in experience. You might be aware of some degree of craving or aversion, and you might not. And you may well be aware of some of the opposites, craving and aversion. Some of the more skillful and positive states. A few moments of love or generosity in the mind. Times when there's patience or ease that you can recognize. But whatever is arising, skillful or unskillful, the task is the same, is to clearly know what's happening. Knowing joy in the mind. Knowing sadness in the mind, perhaps through the body. Knowing it's arising knowing it's persisting and disappearing. And perhaps also noticing some of the qualities of awareness. It's feeling into the mind that's aware, that's knowing or noticing, observing. What does that mind feel like? And not asking the question for a particular answer, but to stimulate curiosity, openness to the experience. And when you notice something that has the flavor or the nature of craving, wanting, or aversion, not wanting, can you also notice the nature of the awareness that is knowing and recognizing those qualities of craving and aversion? Different quality, different nature. Watching out for any judging or comparing mind. And perhaps using a soft mental label. Judging is happening. comparing mind is happening. And this can help know them more clearly as simply objects or happenings arising in the mind. No need to take them so personally. No need to believe their message. So go well through the week. I wish you all good practice, enjoyable practice, and yeah, look forward to maybe engaging with some of you on the Buddhist Center online or next week. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.